It's a high level of conversation on live hiphopdaily.tv. And we're back in studio, as you can clearly see. And tonight I got a special guest in the building with me. Our guest tonight is my man Keith Bolden. Keith works with the Clinical Endocannabinoid System Consortium. I said
Yes.
it. Also known as the CESC. So the CESC, organization, is one of the leading providers of cannabis science and research services in the world. It's really dope to be able to get to know them a little bit more, a little bit. I already had a conversation with one person who's super influential at the CESC, and we're going to talk about him during this interview. But without further ado, my man Keith Bolden. Keith, how you doing today?
Hey, good in yourself.
All right, Keith, I appreciate you for coming by the show tonight. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a few days now, especially after yesterday we actually had a time to actually speak over the phone. I was very engaged with this because, I almost get nervous when I'm talking to people who are super into the science world thing. I'm like, I don't know, man. This might drag for a little bit, but no, you very entertaining person. I was like, no, this is gonna be a great conversation. But for those who are tuning in right now, just please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Absolutely. Again, my name is Keith Bolden. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York.
Go Brooklyn.
Like to say, yes, sir. Like to say, I always say, Brooklyn raised me, but East New York made me.
Oh,
So, been on Wall Street for quite some time. Started back in, I don't want to say it, but 1986, right out of school, and was at Wall Street during like the World Trade Center, both World Trade Center things. And at the time, my wife, who is now deceased, she said, "We got to go, and we got to move to Atlanta." So we came down to Atlanta, did some more financial industry stuff. Last 8 years, I've been doing compliance and risk management. And that really opened my eyes a lot, especially within the cannabis world.
all right. That's interesting, man. So my man's a Brooklyn native.
Yes, sir.
Listen to you talk about that Brooklyn, East New York stuff. I'm from Boston. I'm like, I don't know.
You know what's weird is I was watching Dashida Dawson,
Yeah.
and she's from East New York.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, we got cannabis people from East New York?
Did y'all yell it to each other? Because I know y'all love doing that. Like y'all,
I haven't met her yet. I have not met her yet.
East New York. Y'all love doing
yes,
that.
That would be us.
So, and you were in Wall Street early. That's crazy, especially around the time that you were there. Were you one of the people similar to like Jordan Belfort? When you started, you realized all this is about to crash?
Yes. Yes. And when I started, it was around that Wolf of Wall Street period.
Yeah.
Where everything was first really wild.
Cocaine everywhere. And everybody spending money.
Everywhere. Everywhere. And I was really young, so coming out of school doing that, and I was like, ooh, whoa, what's going on here? Like my first Christmas party was just out of control.
I bet, man. In the 80s, too? I mean,
Yeah.
geez. I mean, I'm pretty sure at this point, everybody at that party would have got canceled at this, you know what I'm saying, in this era of time. But in 86, I could imagine a Christmas party on Wall Street.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, all right, so I do know personally that you work in finance. I'm not going to make you tell us where, but I know that you do work in finance. But something else you do is you work in this cannabis industry. What initially led you to wanting to work in this space, knowing what you've already previously done? Like you mentioned, most of your life has been finance.
Great question. One of the things that really got me was growing up in Brooklyn. I was growing up during that stop and frisk phase. And then when they made cannabis legal in quite a few states, I said, hey, that's something I need to look into. Because back in the day, we were stopped for everything in New York. So, that really irritated me. I said, hey, now that it's legalized, we need to be a part of that. And that's why I started looking at it a little more carefully. And then with my risk background, I started seeing how there was a disconnect between the cannabis industry and banking. And I said, wow,
Oh, yeah.
they just gonna butt heads and just bang at one point. So I said I would love to be in the middle of both of them and say, hey, this is what you need to do, and then this is what you need to do from the cannabis side and then also the banking side.
So now that you that's a good pairing. I mean, clearly we do need some help, and I was actually about to make sure I typed that to myself so I didn't forget about it, because with this we have a discussion now about safe banking, and there's a lot of different opinions about it. Some people are super pro for it, some people are super not. I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit here, but since we did bring up the point about the working in risk management things, do you feel like safe banking as it is right now is something that is I don't want to say needed, but something that would actually benefit the cannabis industry overall. Because I just had a conversation with somebody. I'm not going to say it right now because the episode hasn't dropped, but she was totally against it. She thought it was actually something that could actually be a negative moving forward when it comes to cannabis owners.
The I don't think the way the banking system is now, it's built for us, especially as far as you're talking about social equity. So again, I don't see it as it is now helping a lot of the social equity folks. My personal opinion, um, it's and what's going to happen is what I see happening is that's what we were talking about, the quality assurance coming into play.
Yeah.
In other words, as soon as safe banking comes into play, they're going to raise the stakes. They're going to raise the standards.
True.
And say, hey, this now you have to do this. And that's where I think it's important with the science and the research is because if you give that to the social equity companies, it would kind of level the playing field somewhat. Because what I see coming out of safe banking is they're going to require more from those companies in order to do banking, to bank with them.
Yeah. And when you speak about more, I know you're talking about you just kind of led to it. The quality of the product that you're putting out. You know, you got to go through certain safeguards. They want to make sure that you're being safe with the product that you put out. Corporate America, me working in corporate America for a very short time now, I realize how averse corporate America is to any kind of controversy or any kind of problems. And they will steer as far away as possible about it. It's not even going to be a conversation. So I can see what you were talking about. And is that what you're speaking of? That it's going to start raising the quality of what you actually put out, which is probably going to cost you a whole lot more money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, another thing that has really changed the game as far as compliance is when President Obama was in office with the Dodd-Frank Act and the beneficial ownership, where they make you really dig down to see who owns the company, down to about 10% in certain cases. So that really brought about like knowing and bringing out a lot of people and catching a lot of people, so to speak.
It goes to the conversation we were just talking about Russia. You start finding out how many random people have ownership of these businesses too. Like you're gonna learn a lot more than you care to know.
And you know that's a good point because what I was thinking about as I was coming over here, I was like a lot of these social equity companies should really start asking, say like venture capitalists and venture capital and equity companies and saying, hey, can I get your information? Who owns this and where's the money coming from? And if something happens down the line where something is exposed on your end, how can I be compensated for that? It's because you probably will cause me reputational risk.
Oh, you talking about something I know for a fact would scare a lot of brands of color. Because if you're already sitting in front of a venture capitalist, that's already something that wasn't even in your thought process. So your next thought isn't, I'm not going to lose this money by asking maybe too many questions. But I think it's a good question. You need to start asking that. We all need to start asking that at this point.
Right. You need to have that, the lawyer put it in the document.
Yeah.
You know, put it in the agreement because it's going to be critical going forward, especially with the whole Russian sanction thing. Because right now the way the U.S. has it is if a Russian is a part of that business, they're snatching everything. So it's going to be a big thing. And now seeing the impact that the Russians have had in cannabis, in the U.S. cannabis, it's a question that really needs to be asked.
Cool. All right, so let's get back into the CESC, and I'm going to call it that because the whole entire name, I ain't going to be stumbling over that all night. Talk to us about how you found yourself involved with the CESC.
Dr. Jean Talleyrand, and my brother, they were frat brothers at Brown University. And again, he introduced me to Jean, and we started talking, and we really hit it off. He felt like he needed somebody in the organization from the banking side, and then I was totally interested in the science side and what they were doing, which was something that I didn't see being done in the industry at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, because in being a researcher, I was researching everything. Every time he say something, I'm like, well, is so-and-so doing this or is so-and-so doing that? And I even started asking a lot of the top companies, you know, how do they validate their brands? And they danced around the question. So I started to see how important the work that he was doing was. And then when you look at their background, when you look at Jean's background, Dr. Talleyrand's background, he has been a cannabis doctor since 1998.
Yeah.
He saw his first patient in 98. And when you start hearing the stuff that he has seen as far as like clients who came with certain ailments and then started a cannabis routine and now take no pills, that's impressive.
You know, as you as you mentioned Dr. John, I had a chance to speak with Dr. John. He's an interview on our podcast, so make sure you search Catch Color Cannabis, go listen to that. I'm trying to imagine Dr. John in college, and I feel like was he a beat? Like he was the person at the club, wasn't he? Like he the dude in the. I can see it now. I'm like I feel like he maybe not if you meet him now, you probably wouldn't get that vibe, but I get a vibe that was what he was doing at Brown.
Well, my brother's gonna probably kill me after this episode, but because he's gonna watch it as well, he said. But he was the DJ, and John and the other frat brothers kind of hung around them, and while he was DJing. So apparently they had a lot of fun. They were older than me, so I wasn't a part of that crew.
I'm imagining Dr. John grabbing the mic and freestyling. Like you really gotta meet. You really gotta see this man. It's like I imagine him doing that. And the second thing you mentioned, how he's been a doctor, especially out in California since 1998.
Yes.
I always put years with music. And I'm thinking 98. You talking about Biggie Smalls and all this? Like you was the life after death. You was putting you was helping people learn how to use weed for your body.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Yes, and he was one of the first ones out there that at the time I think they were giving out like medical cards and things like that in California. He was one of the first ones to start that. Now I will say also his partner, Dr. John Abrams, also impressive.
Yeah.
He's one of the top 10, I believe, top 10, or I think it is top 10 scientists in cannabis. Not only that, he is he's in immunology. He's been in pharmaceuticals for quite some time, but also in the past 25 years, he's been researching cannabis as well. And his work in immunology is so serious that not only is he one of the top researchers for his writings on ResearchGate, but for the recent COVID vaccine, a lot of people were researching his work in immunology to kind of figure out where they go with the vaccine. So he has done a lot of great work in immunology. So, I mean, it's a perfect combination.
Yeah.
You have Jean as the doctor seeing patients every day, and then you have the biology, immunology guy, and John who's saying, this is what can happen, this would not happen. And as you see with the initiatives that they have, each one has an expertise. Then they also have another person, initiative with agronomy, and the cultivation side. That guy as well. His name is Billy. He is excellent. I mean, just top notch. So everybody throughout the organization, sometimes I feel like the rookie on the team when we start talking because again they have so much knowledge in the industry.
Yeah. So the CSC is the work that they're doing is amazing. You definitely need more hands on deck when it comes to getting research and getting scientific research in particular about cannabis, because that's how we're going to get to ever some real legalization, some real conversations surrounding that. So you was just discussing some of the initiatives that the CESC is doing right now, and one of the ones I want to speak about is the flagship initiative, which is the Dosing Project. Dr. John and Dr. Bradley, well, they're both working on that together, and it sounded so amazing because it goes back to consumption and consumers, and like you had whittled it down to me over the phone, goes back to how to make a brand that much stronger by knowing specifically how to target a market. Speak to us a little bit about the Dosing Project and why you feel like dosing is important, or learning your dosage is important.
The Dosing Project is the flagship initiative, and it starts out with that. And the thing about the Dosing Project is it's community. So it's working with the community. And I think a lot of within the cannabis industry, we're not hearing a lot about the community and what helps the community. And that's what the Dosing Project does, is getting an understanding of what's the right dosage for individuals and working with them on that. So it needs to start, that's what we talked about the industry. It needs to start like in the dispensaries, getting them to understand, because what we're hearing is a lot of bud tenders don't know what to do in the dispensaries and don't know how to interact with the customers as far as what they need and their needs and what they're looking for. So many complaints. We had recently a question on Twitter where the guy said, look, I'm a runner. I don't want to get really high. I just want to get a little high, just a little edge for me, but I don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
Like, what is out there to do that? And then Dr. Jean started talking to the guy. So, you just start to see the need for that throughout the industry. Just time and time again, people are asking the question, where do I go? How do I get this information? What's the best strain to use for this? I have this ailment, I have that ailment. What do I do?
And all that's expensive. And I hear, like I said, we had a conversation yesterday, so I can't give y'all the full conversation, but we had a chance to discuss a little bit of this last night. And I was thinking to myself, even leading up to this show, that everything you're saying would actually be good for small brands, would be amazing for social equity brands. But then the cost point, the price point of it. How many people have the ability or have the actual funds to be able to get the science that they would need, or get the people on their team that they need, who could help them possibly eliminate 11 of their products and whittle it down to 3, because these 3 are the ones that your people most likely, or that your customer base most likely would lean towards. How would you speak to somebody like that? Like, everything you're saying makes sense, and what the CESC does is amazing, but at this point in my life, I'm not sure I could afford to actually do that.
Well, what I'm seeing is, like, you look at the situation in New York with they're doing a great program with the Cannabis Commission. Then they got a good social equity program. But the one thing I see missing is, how do you help the brands grow with science?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the social equity companies need to start requesting it with the social equity commissions and cannabis commissions throughout the different states, and saying, hey, can I get some help with this? Even like from cultivation and the agronomy side, but then also, again, the science side. How do I help this? How do I grow this brand? How do I, know that I have the best product out there? Level the playing field for me.
Yeah.
They need to probably request that from them as part of the services. Maybe should be offered state to state.
I could see that being something that you would probably expect, especially in this. I think there's so much that that cannabis is missing out, because I feel like, just like we was talking, if we were talking about agriculture, there's certain plants and there's certain crops that would be subsidized by the government. They would actually give you the money to make sure that you're able to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. I feel like another thing that cannabis is suffering from when it comes to that is this. Even though you're seeing money being made off the plant, there's still that stigma over it, where people don't look at it as something that's vital to your life, that the government should pay for it. I can almost hear the uproar. If you started hearing that cannabis was being government subsidized, I can almost hear the uproar. But I feel like they need to be. Like, that should be something that's popped into that. If we're talking about this is a government-funded thing, or the government's involved in any way, make sure that we have the access to the things that we need to make sure we're providing a quality product that's not going to make somebody, like, sick in any way, shape, or form, like you would do any other crop.
But there's another thing we talked about the other day too, which we see a lot of, is the industry has a lot of square pegs and round holes.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the agriculture, the way the structure is now, a lot of those individuals in that field have been doing it for years. I have a cousin who works at the USDA, and it's like they've been doing that for years. He's been doing that since college, and he knows how to help the farmers. But with cannabis, where do you see that? We talked about the other day, like the Georgia Cannabis Commission doesn't really have a cannabis person on the board.
Doesn't have one, not even really.
Right.
They don't have one.
Try to be nice.
Yeah, they don't have one. Somehow, as many people in this state, they don't even have one. And I'm actually kind of when that was brought to my attention, I had about 3 names that popped in my mind about, I see y'all way too much at the state capitol, way too much in front of these people's faces for you not to even be considered, or not part of this. Crazy.
Well, I'm gonna go even further and throw that name out there. Dr. Rashawn Hodge is awesome.
Yeah,
I saw him at the Morehouse
should
conference.
be on that. That definitely should be on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely should be part of that.
And he has a store here, as Memorial Drive.
Yeah.
But he is awesome. His store. So he gave so much information that night that we saw him. My son was impressed, and so was I.
Yeah, Dr. Rashawn is a very knowledgeable person, very qualified, credited person. So yeah, I would have loved to see him on there. Like, but I'm beside the point. You know what I'm saying? That's beside the point. But like, you're right. Like, I would love to see the government get involved, but like you say, we got a situation in Georgia. Like, we don't even have a scientist on the board. So
right.
Where will we go from there?
Exactly.
It's the square pegs and the round holes at this point.
Exactly. They kind of lost me when they put the Sheriff Mostel on there.
It lost me when they said 0.5% what
Yes.
THC oil. I was like, how was that a starting? How was that a starting point at all?
Yes. I'm curious to watch the. I'm anxious to see what happens in Alabama
Why you say that?
because the way they're
Mm-hmm.
wording it like you said with the Georgia ones like point 0.5
Yeah.
THC and all that, but Alabama just kind of seems like they're going to open it up like we're going to have dispensaries.
Yeah.
And it kind of seems like, well, what are you going to have in there? Like, you're going to put flour in there? Like, what's going on?
Bro, I see so many of my cousins hitting my line right now. I got a bunch of family in Alabama, and there's a the farmland that we own, and we talking about been ringing for years anyway. This interview is gonna be like, hey, about that time, about that time. Let's make use of all this.
Exactly. And I got my family in South Carolina, so trust you me, we got that conversation as well.
Yeah. While on the campaign trail, Joe Biden, I almost said Budden. Oh my gosh, Joe Budden is offended. Joe Biden spoke often about legalization, and he spoke often about his feelings about it. And I was reading an article that CBS News did where they spoke to him while he was on the campaign trail, and he spoke about being in favor of legalization. But this point stuck out to me. But he was on the fence due to medical officials that says weed is really still not good for you. And I thought immediately then that's where the CESC should come in play. like that's where again you might have some other people around you who can kind of give you that another opinion that may make you feel like, all right, well maybe I was wrong. What do you feel like? What would your response be to the POTUS right now? And how do you feel like the CESC what they can actually bring to the table if actually asked?
Great question. You know, the first reaction with the interview that I saw, he said, "Where's the research?" And when he said that, I was in my living room waving. Here we are. Here we are, right here.
Yeah.
You know, so we have the research that he's talking about, and that he needs to get. But again, like we talked about earlier, one of the things that's crippling the businesses is the 280E tax. You know, you can't pay for research if you also get unfairly taxed more so than other regular businesses. President Biden, you need to get rid of the 280E.
Yeah.
You want the research, they got to be able to pay for it. Right now, there were a lot of, also, that's the thing that impresses me about Dr. Talleyrand and Dr. Abrams, is that for years, as you know, there was like one lab in like Mississippi that could do research on cannabis. Like the University of Mississippi was the only university that could do anything. So they're behind with their research as well as far as federally. Get rid of the 280E tax so you can allow companies individually to start paying and have some money to pay for research if you want that research done. But then also come look at the CESC and the stuff that we're doing.
One of the other initiatives that the CESC is doing is the Cannabis Mind. Explain to us the concept of that and why that may be important when it comes to not just consumers but businesses as well.
You know, I got something that I took from that we had a question that was asked about the Cannabis Mind.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just read that briefly, because the Cannabis Mind is the elephant in the room. When people talk about cannabis is the psychoactive effect, many consumers use cannabis for the psychoactive effect. On the other hand, government regulators prohibit cannabis because of the psychoactive effects. The Cannabis Mind deals with the elephant in the room. Cannabis use results in a broad range of psychoactive states, from altered consciousness to energetic to sedative, to focused, aroused, creative, and many more. CESC maps the Cannabis Mind using subjective scales and quantitative EEG as a biomarker. That's the Cannabis Mind, and that's where we need to go to figure out what it's doing. And the CESC has been working to understand that. And it all starts with the Bolden project, and then we also have the immunity initiative as well, and then you come to the Cannabis Mind. And the immunity also goes back to the diseases that cannabis might be able to help in learning about that, and that's Dr. John Abrams' expertise. So again, the CESC has the whole package from beginning to end, from the time you start growing to the time it's out the door with the consumer, and then what happens to that consumer after that. And again, this is the research that each cannabis company needs to have.
Definitely, they need to have that, man. I would love to see how it plays out as we move forward. When you were speaking about the cannabis mind and tracking how people consume and what it's actually doing to your body, another thought that popped in my mind was overconsumption. Do you? And maybe it's just the places I'm around. Like I feel like a lot of times I'm in conferences and I'm a lot of people who do consume. I feel like I'm watching people overconsume at this point. Like stuffing a whole 3.5 grams into one blunt. Like, what's the purpose of that? Like, I don't like. Is it getting you extra higher, or like what are we doing? Do you feel like at this point people are over consuming, and that's something like the cannabis mind, something like the dosing project could actually help people understand what their actual amount is. Like maybe your amount is actually a half a joint. Like I know, you know what I'm saying, not necessarily a whole entire cigar. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you feel like that's something that can help as far as when it comes to figuring out if you're over consuming?
Absolutely. And right now, there's nothing to gauge it.
No.
There's nothing to say, hey, whoa, this is enough for me. I've had enough. This is my limit. But then you also got to look at, as we talked about earlier, some people can handle more than others.
Yes.
Some people do dose a lot more than others, and it's okay for them. So that's where the dosing project comes into play, figuring that out and understanding what works for everyone.
Yeah. I think marketing-wise, it's definitely going to be good. We were talking about, and this is off the subject a tad bit, but we were talking a little bit off air about dispensaries. And I've spoken about this many times on the show. I'm not a dispensary person. It's weird for me to go into a dispensary. It's no knock on them. There's some beautiful dispensaries when you walk into them, but it's just not my thing. My thing is, let me call my boy and go down to his crib, and he got a couple of jars. He knows exactly what these are. Like I've just it's an experience I've been doing my whole entire life, and I'm not the only person. Like my whole entire generation is probably like that. You have a guy you go, they come to you. We have whole conversations. It's like a thing. You know what I'm saying? I feel like the generation that's going to be actual dispensary consumers either haven't been born yet or they're in their early teens right now. Because you got to get to a point where that's just how you grew up. You know what I mean? Like you grew up you seeing legal states go up. You go into places when you travel, you're seeing dispensaries. I ain't never seen that. I grew up knowing that if I want some weed again, either I'm going to the gas station, I'm going to start looking around to the dude who's going to start looking back at me. Or I'm already know somebody when I get there. I never thought about going to a store. How do you feel like some of the initiatives that the CESC are doing can help also whittle down who's going to be an actual dispensary consumer? Do you think is that possible?
Absolutely. Because again, the initiatives that the CESC has, they engage the customer.
Okay.
And that's where the problem is right now. So for example, as you talked about, what do we do when we had the legacy side and we said, hey, the first time we got that stuff from that one person, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And then we came back and 2 weeks later they gave us some really bad stuff and we were like, I'm never going to them again. I got to find somebody else. That's kind of what I see happening with the legal side now, is that I'm seeing a lot of people complaining, and not only complaining about the small mom and pop stores, but the large institutions, the large businesses as well for cannabis. Why? Because they don't have that information there to understand what's going on, like with the cannabis, what they need for cannabis. They don't have it, and that's what's missing as a part of this industry.
I'm going to love to see the cannabis industry evolve, because I think that's definitely what you're mentioning is definitely going to be a thing. You're going to start seeing a lot more people try to figure out exactly who whittle it down to the smallest detail, who this person is who's going to walk into this store. You're going to start figuring that out versus just saying, yeah, we got weed. Because hey, you yelling that, I know a couple guys who got weed. Well, I got to go down here and get overtaxed for it.
Right. I mean, even like what you said, what we talked about earlier with the dosing project. If they come into your store and you said, hey, take a look at this dosing project, and take this survey for us so we can better understand your needs. That's engaging the customer. The customer is going to come back, another time and say, hey, what did you find out about me? What happened? What's the best thing for me? That's the type of stuff, that's the type of customer service. I'm not seeing really good customer service in the industry right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of focus on who owns everything.
Yeah.
And the real who did something cool as far as marketing. But where is building the brand? Where is understanding your product?
Yeah.
That I'm not seeing in the industry.
Yeah, and we're gonna eventually get there because the industry itself is super fairly new. You're really at this point we're blessed to be able to see the industry grow from infant to child right now, and eventually we're gonna see a whole grown ass person. That's called
Yes.
that's called the cannabis industry, and that grown ass person is gonna be like, oh, the thing I did when I was 10, I will certainly do now when I'm 30. We're gonna eventually see that. But right now we're not there. Like right now, you just see a bunch of people throwing stuff against the wall, and I can't stress this enough. I'm not a dispensary person. It's not like I won't pop into y'all shit, but excuse me, I won't pop into y'all spots. But it's consistently, it's never. I'm not your customer base. Just period, point blank. I'm not your dude.
Well, again,
Don't give me the customer card. Like I'm check.
But again, why at this point would you go?
I wouldn't go.
There's no reason to go.
I wouldn't go. Like even when I'm back home, even though I'm in Boston, it's not a thought in my mind to go unless I'm going because, like, I know there's a dispensary that's about to open up in my neighborhood, Mattapan. I'm 100% gonna go the day that opens. I don't know if I'm gonna go again, but I'm definitely gonna go the day it opens.
But what happens if they engage you once you're in there to better understand you as a customer?
Then I'd make it a point to not just go when I'm going home, not to just go to Mattapan to go get a slice of pizza from Mattapan House. I'm also gonna stop down here and go get me an ounce. Like I would make that. It would make sense to me. Like again, some about customer service, engaging your customer, learning your customer, and learning what they actually want that's in your store. You know what I mean? Like again, it's gonna take a while. Right now, I'm watching the cannabis industry be like a 5-year-old. You know what I'm saying? Like I still gotta I gotta see what he's like as a 15-year-old.
They're kind of acting like the guy that just got drafted on draft day. Like we're just starting out right now.
Yeah.
Not knowing what the rest of the world is going to be after this, and all the NFL, say for example, is going to be after this.
Don't understand none of these women in the hotel lobby. Think they all your friends. That's the cannabis industry.
Exactly.
I know you're a fan of Troy Datcher, and I actually had a chance to talk to Troy when I was in New Orleans. Troy is a really cool dude. For those who don't know, Troy is the head of the parent company. Parent company works with a lot of amazing brands. One of the brands is Jay-Z's Monogram, and Troy actually comes from a whole different industry than cannabis. He comes from Clorox bleach of all places. Yes. but you're a fan of Troy. Talk to me about what you do like about Troy Datcher.
I think, again, I talked about it earlier. I posed that question, that validation question, to a couple executives, including Troy Datcher, and it was through somebody else, but they asked the question for me. And from that point on, I started watching the moves that he was making. And the moves that he's making is to build a brand, which I'm really highly love. I mean, it's, I love someone who's building the brand. The second thing, like even recently that they're doing, they put together just recently, I think in the last 2 weeks, a social equity program, I think it was like a 10 or 18-week program for social equity companies. Love it. Absolutely love it. Because again, every step that he makes, he's building the brand like he was with Clorox. And it's not an overnight thing, as you talked about. The industry doesn't change overnight. It takes time. And that's what he's doing. And he's clearly, you can see he's doing it. Now, I will say where's the camera? I will say the one thing he's missing is that I see so far, because he didn't talk about it, is some of the science that the CESC offers.
I was about to say he's about to say it. he's missing the science. They definitely got the marketing down pat. Cause I mean,
yes.
from the like you say, you look at Monogram, from the packaging of Monogram to another spot they work with. They work with Josephine and Billy's to even with how their dispensary look. I'd go there maybe a couple of times just because I like how y'all look. You know what I'm saying? I think they put a lot of good effort into creating the storefront and the theme behind this. Super dope.
But imagine if they add the science. Add the science. And you got it all. They got the marketing down. I mean, again, you got the name, you got Jay-Z.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious to see how Diddy does with his stuff and what he's going to do.
Oh, we all curious about what Diddy does. Like that news broke the minute I got to New Orleans for the conference. You talk about couldn't stop talking about that. Everybody around the corner was like, "Yo, you heard about Diddy? You heard about Diddy?" I'm like, I feel like he just bought a company. Like I don't know. Again, give me some time. This is a 5-year-old kid. I need to see what this company about to look like because I saw Revolt early, and it took a minute before Revolt even had their own content.
Well, let's call them out.
I just did.
Equity,
I think.
Social equity. Come on, just like Jay-Z, get some social equity stuff going. Yeah. Get the research added to that.
Yeah. Sprinkle a little bit of science on that.
Exactly, and help. He's used to coming up from nothing and making something out of nothing. So, again, do it with this. Level the playing field. So that way make the product just as good as those big boys.
Yeah. Are y'all gonna ever start your own conference? I mean, I know there's Emerald conferences and things like that, but I feel like, have you ever thought to yourselves, I'm gonna have a CESC conference?
That's a great question. Dr. Abrams was actually one of the, I want to say, I don't want to jump the gun, but I want to say like a co-founder of the Emerald Science Conference.
Oh, really?
He was
I
the
didn't know that.
science director at the Emerald Science Conference.
Okay.
And then they got taken over by or purchased by MJ Biz. And then last year, Dr. Talleyrand did a presentation at the Emerald Science Conference.
Yeah, that's how I knew about it. Yeah,
And he's still a part of that. Dr. Abrams isn't. But again, he was one of the start. He was one who did it from the start, which again goes back to, when you talk about the dream team,
yeah.
they have the dream team. Because again, everybody that was associated with that Emerald Science Conference, they all come to Dr. Abrams. He's like a mentor to all those individuals. They have the dream team.
It's crazy. I keep getting emails about the Emerald Conference all the way down to the after parties, and I'm like, I can't imagine what the after party is at a science convention. Like, what the hell that look like? What the hell we about to do up in here, man?
Well, and Dr. Talleyrand, he doesn't, like last year when he went, he didn't say that he went to any of them. But again, he's all science.
Yeah.
If those guys could stay in the lab 24 hours a day, they would. They love the science. They love the research. But also, it's about helping people. Because again, one of the biggest joys that they get is something that to create something that's going to help the world and help the individuals around them. So they're always helping. I mean, even in our meetings, they're always helping. John's the first one to make sure everybody's okay. How are you doing? I know because I went to Vegas last week. I know he's going to say, "Hey, how was Vegas?" As soon as we meet this week.
Did you meet my guy?
Exactly.
I can hear Dr. Talleyrand. Did you meet my guy? How can we support the CESC?
Yeah, as a consumer, ask you if you're one of the ones that does go in the dispensary.
Oh, so not me. But so one of y'all who listen or listens to this show, this is how you can support the CESC.
As a dispensary, where's the science?
Yeah.
Now, and then there's levels, because again, the other thing I wanted to point out too is one of the things we were looking to do too as well is to do some research to partner with some universities, and especially like HBCUs, to do some research and work with them to do that as well. So if you're HBCU or university, talk to us.
Hey man, shout out Morehouse, man, because Morehouse has been rolling out Ganjapreneur alumni for a little while. I don't know if y'all know, but y'all might want to get into the science. you might want to dig into this, because I don't know what's going on in the water down there, but I've for some reason,
Exactly.
5 or 7 of my guests, where you went to? Morehouse. The hell, what's going on in Morehouse?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, we're more than willing to work with
Y'all
them.
need the science.
We're more than willing to work with them. And then, and then also we go back to, like we were talking about, the cannabis commissions and the social equity commissions throughout state to state. Hey, again, if you guys, need that science and you want to attach the science to the social equity companies, give us a call.
Okay, man. Hey, so if somebody, how can they follow CESC on social media? How can somebody just learn about them, even if they just somebody who's listening, who's speed listening, and say, who's this? I just want to go to their page and check them out.
Sure. We have a website, thecesc.org, www.thecesc.org. That's our main website that we have all information on. I put a lot of information on my personal Twitter, Instagram, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I also started using a Burners thing, Social Circle.
I got Social Circle too.
So I also started using that. So I put a lot of CESC stuff on those platforms, the different stuff we're working on, the initiatives we're working on.
Yeah.
That was my last post, was the initiatives and stuff, and the capabilities that the CESC has.
So, man, well, Keith, I totally appreciate you coming by tonight. It's been an amazing conversation, and I think the one thing I'm gonna pull away from this interview is, we need to add a little science to it.
Absolutely, every week, maybe get a little piece of the section of the show, just science. Maybe put Dr. Talleyrand on the phone or something.
Dr. Talleyrand, the science
oh,
guy. Oh, that would be
even better.
amazing.
Even better, take questions from the community and say, hey, you got questions for Dr. Talleyrand?
Did you throwing show ideas here, segments? Is that the Brooklyn in you right there,
Absolutely.
man? They said, let me hustle my way into an extra segment.
Absolutely. So hey, Troy Dasher, Jay-Z, give us a call.
You should just walk through one day and just yell East New York, and whoever pop out the office and start talking to him. Keith, I appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
No problem. And that's Cash Color Campus, a high level of conversation on livehip-hopdaily.tv.
Yes, sir.